Good afternoon, evening, middle of the night, or morning, my friends, depending on when you are listening to this. We are roughly a week away from the New York primary in both the Republican and the Democratic primaries. New York has been considered a sort of gimme for both Donald Trump and Hillary Clinton for a long time now. But what I want to explore with you today, if Lewis will allow me, is whether that is actually the foregone conclusion many want us to think it is. Let's start first on the Democratic side. How do the Democratic primary polls in New York look right now? Well, if we look at the Real Clear Politics averages of recent polls at different points over the last, I don't know, month or so, you will see that about a month ago, Hillary Clinton had a 60-28 lead over Bernie Sanders in the big prize of New York. 2 weeks later, Hillary Clinton had climbed to 63%, while Bernie Sanders had climbed to 30% as uncertainty about who people would vote for started to evaporate. On April 10th, just a few days ago, Hillary Clinton held a 54-40 lead over Bernie Sanders, losing about 10 points off of her lead from March. And then most recently, as of this morning, a Real Clear Politics average of recent polls has Hillary Clinton up over Bernie Sanders by roughly 53-39. Is New York State now in play? There's no doubt whatsoever that Bernie Sanders has surged in New York State, the state that both he and Hillary consider their sort of home states, although Hillary not really from New York and Bernie Sanders born in New York, but a longtime Vermont resident and Vermont's elected official. Bernie is still far back, Lewis, but he has closed that gap.
Bernie's best day is always voting day.
Really? Well, except when he underperforms the polls.
But how many times has that happened out of all the primaries?
Not that often.
Yes. So the days leading up to and the day of, I expect these numbers to be more in Bernie's favor.
Well, that's the talking point, right? Tomorrow night, Thursday night, there is a Brooklyn Democratic presidential debate on CNN, which is a big deal is being made out of that. And the talking point is Bernie is going to surge. He's going to have a huge weekend. It's going to be absolutely tremendous. And then next Tuesday, Bernie's going to knock it out of the park. Let's sort of take a step back from whether Hillary wins by 7 or 12 or Bernie pulls out a victory by 2 or 5 or whatever. What we have to remember, and now, interestingly, I said this Monday, but now we have more and more articles being written about this. The scenario where there is a Democratic contested convention in Philadelphia this summer is becoming more and more likely. And you remember, Lewis, I came to you with this story on Monday. You thought I was nuts. You barely even let me do that story on Monday. That's not really true, but Lewis was skeptical. But now we actually had a number of articles today which said, hey, guys, if Bernie Sanders can keep getting around 48% of the vote, there's not going to be a winner before the Democratic National Convention, and we will have a contested convention here. And that's the bigger picture. Whether Bernie gets 55% or 47% in New York, if it's either of those scenarios, Lewis, it almost doesn't matter whether he wins or loses because it's the number, it's within that window that prevents anybody from getting to the nomination before the Democratic Convention.
And he will have to do that in every other state, but I do expect him to be right about at that level in New York.
And what about the Republican side in New York State? Donald Trump is way up. He's up by an average of 33 percentage points in a recent Real Clear Politics average of polls. So it may be that may be it in terms of New York. And Donald Trump, we know, very, very strong in New York. He loves New York. Ted Cruz with a totally abortive attempt at appealing to New York voters after talking about New York values as a negative thing a bunch of times. It's even been suggested, Lewis, that New York values has anti-Semitic undertones to it. Be that as it may, it's not at all looking like Ted Cruz is going to do well in the state of New York. But we'll have final polling for you next week before the election.